Hello and welcome to ERRATA, the follow-up to the 7 Deadly Trading Card Game Sins, where we look at additional elements of game design. Counterplay is the element of game design that looks not at how interesting a game's mechanics are to play with, but instead how interesting those mechanics are to play against. Reaching a bit afield here, a guy called Lazy Purple has made a series of videos about the game feel of the video game Team Fortress 2, and in his video about playing the Pyro, he talks about how the most fun he has as the class is when he's interacting with the mechanics of other classes through air blasting or spy checking. The Pyro's weapon can let out a puff of hot air to push enemies away or reflect grenades and rockets, and his wide fire cone can clip sneaking spies to reveal their positions. This means that the other players also have to consider the Pyro's kit and can switch weapons and classes accordingly. Counterplay has its place in card games as well. The Toolbox deck springs to mind as it's designed to be able to engage with any type of opponent or strategy, and games that allow sideboards allow players to tweak their decks in between matches to accommodate for their opponents. It's a huge part of what makes these games engaging and why a diverse metagame is important. Cards that an average player simply has no way of responding to and which can lead to degenerate strategies are often debilitating to a gameplay experience due to lack of counterplay. Power creep is what happens when cards escalate in power and previous cards become worthless. It's because a card like the fetch lands come out. They can basically act like a giant domino to set off a whole bunch of other stuff. The fact that you have to go through your deck, the fact that you basically get to play a second land card means that it activates landfall abilities twice. You see, all those added steps mean that it can be a powerful combo starter, and that is something that this pathway simply cannot do. This simply enters play and it's done. So because the fetch lands exist, every other special land card that gets released now gets compared to the fetch lands. Wizards is in a really tight spot because they can't really print something better than the fetch lands, but at the same time it's hard for them to print something not as good as the fetch lands because people really want these fetch lands. Accretion is a phenomenon in gaming where a game slowly grows in complexity over time due to the accumulation of additional mechanics, card types, and keywords. It is also frequently called feature creep, and is not to be mistaken for power creep because, while power creep is the result of introducing more and more powerful and effective cards, feature creep instead increases a game's complexity, which runs the risk of making it hostile to new players. However, it is also kind of a necessary evil because a game that never innovates or develops any sort of new ideas is doomed to become stale and boring. Now, accretion has an effect on games that do rotate and don't rotate. They both have to keep coming up with new stuff in order to stay interesting. The only real difference is that a game that does rotate can get rid of ones that maybe do a bit too much harm, whereas a game that doesn't rotate can really only get rid of such harmful mechanics by banning them, although both games can just stop printing them anytime they want to. So this is the mindset that you should probably use when putting your rulebook together. So a couple of guys, they've just acquired your game and are super excited to play it. They've ripped off the cellophane and opened the box. One of them picks up the rulebook and starts to read aloud, while the other one, an energetic guy, he starts to mess around with the contents of the box. Your goal is to get these two idiots playing your game before they break something or hurt themselves. So what needs to happen is how your rulebook is structured is that you need to give the players the rules as they are needed. The first rule that they need is how to win. They need to know how to win the game because it is the crux around which all of your other rules will find context. You see these other things in the rules is like, okay, that's how this contributes to me winning, that's how this contributes to me winning, and you can see it in any competently written rule book. The first thing they say is how to win. Like, let's see, we got Dragon Ball Super, I got a number here, so Dragon Ball Super, number 1, introduction, number 2, how to win. Monopoly as a board game is a bit different, although this mindset works for board games too. First thing, set it up. Step 2, how to win. The thing you should follow that up with are, these are where you put things like the contents of the box, or the setup diagrams, or instructions on how to read a card. This is, it shouldn't be like a super in-depth talk about the contents of the box. You won't want to put deck lists there or anything. You'll either want to put those on the back of the box or in the back of the book. But This is so that the guy who's taking the stuff out of the box on the other end, he's like, okay, that's this, that's this, that's this. He's keeping these things organized rather than throwing stuff everywhere and making a mess. And then, you know, you do the rules for setup, and the guy who's playing with the stuff in the box is like, okay, so you get this, and I get this, and you get that. The thing you want to follow up with next after setup, a step-by-step guide. Here's a good example from Dragonborn. A step-by-step guide on how a turn will play out. It needs to be concise, it needs to fit on one page, and might even be a good idea to print it on the back of your rulebook, because this is the thing that the players are going to visit most, is figuring out that turn sequence. A lot of games have very different turn sequences, so keeping that in a place that's easy to spot is really important. And what you do is, on that list, you then have next to each step, you have page numbers that players can flip to learn more of the specifics. It's like, okay, after I've played a monster, I want to fight with it, so let's flip to that page that tells us how battle works. It's, again, giving players the instructions they need at the pace that they need them, as they are needed.